How did the vertebrate eye evolve? Well, if one considers the chordate ancestors of the vertebrates, they do have some of the components which vertebrates use in their eyes, but they do not have complex lateral eyes. When one considers the jawless fish, the lamprey, it has complex eyes complete with a lens, a cornea, an iris, extrinsic eye muscles, and other features found in the eyes of higher vertebrates. How did such a structure evolve? There is a second type of jawless fish in addition to the lamprey, the hagfish. What are its eyes like? Well, they are certainly different from those of other vertebrates. There is no lens, no cornea, no iris, no pigmented epithelium, no extrinsic or intrinsic eye muscles. There are two layers of the retina instead of three. There's no ganglion cell layer. The eye is covered by translucent skin, unlike other vertebrates. The retina projects to the hypothalamus rather than the midbrain. The shape of the photoreceptors are primitive, resembling those of the pineal gland rather than the rods of vertebrate eyes. The eyes primarily function in circadian rhythms rather than vision. Hagfish have extremely primitive eyes. Why are hagfish eyes so primitive? Well, one explanation is that hagfish ancestors had eyes similar to those of the ancestors of lampreys, but they have since degenerated. The molecular evidence, which suggests that hagfish and lampreys are equally related to the jawed vertebrates, would support this, as would a fossil hagfish, which seems to have possessed larger eyes than modern hagfish. If hagfish ancestors had more advanced eyes and have since degenerated, perhaps as an adaptation for life at the bottom of the ocean, then hagfish eyes are not that interesting, at least in the context of how the eyes of more complex vertebrates evolved. There is another explanation, however, and this is more consistent with the original classification of hagfish as craniate fish, which were not true vertebrates. This classification was derived on the anatomical structures in multiple systems of the hagfish, where they are far more primitive than lampreys. So their hearts are more primitive, their kidneys are more primitive, their brains are more primitive. And so one classification of hagfish is that they are an earlier branch of the fish family tree. And since they don't have the cartilaginous neural arches over the spinal cord, that they might not even be classified as true vertebrates, but rather as craniates, a more primitive group, with lampreys being the most primitive vertebrates. If this classification of hagfish is the correct one, which anatomists tend to support as opposed to those who are using the genetic analyses, then the hagfish eyes become more interesting because this then suggests that the first fish, the ancestors of hagfish, had very primitive eyes, which arguably were more like the pineal glands in functioning in circadian rhythms and were not capable of vision in the modern sense. The fact that larval lampreys possess simple eyes with similarities to those of hagfish may support this idea. In this model, the complexities of the eyes we see in lampreys would have evolved somewhere between the ancestors of hagfish and the ancestors of the first vertebrates and primitive vertebrates like lampreys in the family tree. So until the position of hagfish in the vertebrate family tree is completely resolved, it is unknown whether the importance of hagfish eyes is great, showing an intermediate stage in evolution, or minor, simply showing that the ancestral hagfish eyes have degenerated to a simple form.